Welcome to True Indigenous Crime Tuesday, and welcome to a brand new episode of One Missing, One Murdered, All Indigenous, which is a true crime podcast dedicated to true crime cases involving Indigenous people. I'm your host, Jordan Lombert, and I want to say thank you again for checking out all the brand new stuff that we've got going on. I know it's been really hectic and really busy for everybody, but that's life, you know? And I'm really excited to talk about some of the stuff that's been going on here on my end here. First of all, thank you to everybody that's checked out my brand new paranormal podcast called Scary Stories to Tell from the Res, which is a paranormal podcast where we talk about all the scary stories that our elders told us not to. But don't worry, they're just stories. And thank you to everybody that has checked that out. And thank you to all the new followers, and welcome to our true crime podcast. And before we get into the nitty-gritty of everything, I'd actually like to take time to introduce our brand new sponsor. And I'd like to thank Twisted Bear Boutique for sponsoring this episode of One Missing, One Murdered. Now, in honor of our brand new sponsor, we've actually rebranded the studio that we're in today. So now all of your podcasts, that I put out anyway, will be coming from the new Twisted Bear studio. Now, a little bit about the Twisted Bear Boutique. Twisted Bear offers a wide selection of clothing lines that help its customers be bold, be edgy, to be authentic, and to be radiant, and most of all, to be bear. You can check them out on Facebook at Twisted Bear Boutique. So sometime soon, we'll have to sit down with the owner and operator of Twisted Bear Boutique, but that'll have to be in a later time. So once again, thank you to Twisted Bear Boutique. Now, as you all know, April is Child Abuse Prevention Month. Now, it's been a long time since I've been able to do podcasts in April, just due to, the seasons not aligning out right. So today, I'd like to dedicate this episode to help raising awareness for Child Abuse Prevention Month. So with that all being said, now that we've got all the sponsors out of the way, let's get into our first case of the day. All right, everybody. Well, let's kick the show off by talking about our first case of the day and talk about the mysterious case of Brittany Lynn Locklear. This is a case that definitely caught me off guard, and it's definitely done a lot to me as far as researching and the impact that it's had personally on me. In the dark early morning hours of January 7th of 1998, 5-year-old Brittany Locklear, who was a member of the Lumbee Indian tribe, was standing at the end of the driveway of her mobile home right off of Gainey Road in Rayford, North Carolina. Now, she and her mother, Connie Locklear Chavez, were actually waiting patiently for the school bus to pick up little Brittany to take her to school, where she attended kindergarten at the West Hoke Elementary. Now, while they were waiting, Brittany's mother, Connie, actually had to use the restroom, so she actually left Brittany waiting outside for the bus while Connie ran inside to go to use the restroom. And so Brittany was left to wait for the bus by herself. Now, soon after Connie actually came back outside, she realized that Brittany was nowhere to be seen. Now, Connie soon panicked and rushed down to the school to check to see if Brittany had actually made it. She kind of assumed that she jumped on the bus. And when she got to the school, unfortunately, the school officials would inform her that Brittany never made it to school that day. And it wouldn't take long to find out that Brittany had actually been abducted. Now, several of Connie's neighbors actually came forward saying that they had witnessed Brittany being grabbed by an unidentified man in a brown pickup truck. Now, one witness even gave a statement saying that, quote, "I saw a truck come flying around the curve and down toward Brittany. It slowed down quickly and someone hopped out of the truck real fast. He bent over like he was picking something up and hopped back in the truck and drove away real fast." Now, the neighbors actually witnessed that abduction around 7 o'clock that same morning. And one of the things that stood out in some of the testimony was that Brittany didn't actually resist the person that had picked her up. So that's been a lot of debate as to who this was. Maybe that Brittany might have known her abductor, but it hasn't really been speculated too much on in the years since. Now, community members, along with local law enforcement agencies, actually launched right into action to try and help find Brittany. More than 500 people joined in on the search for Brittany. Now, that same day, searchers would actually recover Brittany's backpack, along with a pair of overalls and shoes that she'd actually been wearing that same day. And they were actually found on Ryan McBride Road, which was just about 2 miles from where Brittany had last been seen. "I'm scared that somebody killed her," Connie said to the Fayetteville Observer reporter as she was waiting at the sheriff's office at the time. Quote, "You always hear it in the news, and you never think it'll hit home, but it has," end quote. So this is clearly a parent's worst nightmare, to not only have your child missing, but to be told that they had been abducted and that witnesses had actually seen her get abducted. I can't imagine, and nor do I wish it on anybody that actually happens. Now, just one day after Brittany was abducted and they had found the last of Brittany's belongings, Connie's worst fears would come true as searchers would tragically come across the lifeless body of little Brittany Locklear. Now, her body had actually been discovered lying naked in a drainage ditch off of Ried McBride Road, which was about 3 miles away from her family home. Unfortunately, an autopsy would show and confirm that 5-year-old Brittany had been actually raped as well as drowned in that same drainage ditch. If I could take a minute, that is probably the worst ending that nobody was ever waiting for. And for your worst fears to actually get even worse is something that I would never wish on anybody. Early on into the investigation, both of Brittany's parents were cleared of any involvement with her death. Now, the police would actually go on to interview any and all registered sex offenders within a 50-mile radius of Brittany's home, but, there was no credible leads that were discovered. Police would actually say that they were flooded with tips left and right, and that there actually was a lot of them that had actually fallen through the cracks during that time period, due to the police force being very understaffed and ill-equipped to handle so many calls and so many tips that were happening at the time. Now, over the years, police have actually kept a lot of details as to the progress of their investigation pretty close to the chest, and I think that it goes to what we always talk about, that you don't want to put out too much information that could possibly jeopardize the case. So there hasn't been a lot of announcement as to how many suspects or how many people of interest that they put out. The only one that I found in my research was Keith Douglas Laundrie. Authorities actually were investigating, looked into a potential suspect who was actually an inmate at the Hyde County Jail, which would have been Laundrie. Now, Laundrie would have been about 44 years old, and he was serving 18 months in the Hyde Correctional Center for robbing a B&B&T bank in Carthage. Now, Laundrie was actually arrested in 2003 on July 29th. Now, the reason that Laundrie had actually been brought up as a suspect was because that a little bit about him is that he was actually a former firefighter who had actually been released from the Fort Bragg Fire Department earlier in that year. When they were emptying out his locker, they had actually found a photo of Brittany. Now, it was actually a photo clipping from a newspaper article that was actually in Laundrie's firefighter locker. But there's actually not been a lot of explanation as to why Laundrie would have had this picture in his locker. It leaves it up to interpretation. But authorities actually were able to take a DNA sample from Laundrie, and according to the articles and everything that I've read on this case, Laundrie was not ever cleared, nor was he really announced further into the investigation. Over the years, the Federal Bureau, the FBI, and the State Bureau of Investigation has investigated hundreds of leads and tips that have come in. I mean, there's even the number out there that I've seen is about 1,600 case reports. So, but as of today, this case it's essentially a cold case, and it's actually been about 24 years as of this year, 24 years since this case happened, and there hasn't been many updates over those years outside of Laundrie's name. Now, authorities have actually spent a lot of time looking into the possible witness that said that they had seen a brown truck connected to Brittany's disappearance that day. The furtherance of their investigation efforts, the State Bureau of Investigation of Hoke County and South Carolina has actually offered up a reward of $20,000 for any information that would have helped. And a good way to get a hold of them is by calling the SBI Operations Center in Raleigh, North Carolina at 1-800-334-3000. Once again, that number to the SBI Operations Center of Raleigh, North Carolina is 1-800-334-3000. So I ask you all, if you know something or if somebody knows something, let's try to bring justice to Brittany, who was cut off at the starting line of life. With COVID-19 cases declining to low levels across Indian country, it feels like the pandemic is now behind us. However, COVID-19 is still spreading in our communities and new variants are still emerging that could spread more quickly or cause more severe illness. Many states have begun to end mask mandates and other COVID-19 prevention measures, but we recognize that the pandemic is still impacting communities across Indian country. As we move forward, it is important that we continue to protect those that are precious to us by following local guidance and being respectful of those around us. With tribal sovereignty and local differences in COVID spread, some communities may have different rules depending on their needs. So check with your local tribal government or local healthcare provider to learn more about guidance for your community, and do what feels safe and comfortable to protect you and your family in situations where guidance has become more relaxed. All right, everybody. Well, let's keep the ball rolling as we talk about our final case of the day, and we talk about the strange disappearance of Tiffany Casey Reid. Now, in 2004, Tiffany Reid was a 16-year-old indigenous female. More specifically, she was actually a member of the Dene Navajo Nations. Now, on the morning of May 17th of 2004, in the town of Shiprock, New Mexico, Tiffany actually was getting ready for school like she always did. And as she made her way to school that same morning, nobody knew that it would actually be the last time that anyone would see Tiffany ever again. Now, the last time that anyone actually saw Tiffany was that morning around 8:30, and she was headed toward school. Now, according to a lot of the articles that I've researched into and read into, it's never really confirmed whether or not she made it to school. Now, with this being 2004, you can't necessarily just reach out to, like we do today. You can't just send them a text or call them on their cell phone and be like, hey, where are you at? So I'd imagine that Tiffany's parents, or Tiffany's mom in particular, was probably pretty worried. Actually, her mom, it's funny because a lot of these articles that I've read are very one way or another, that whether or not Tiffany's mom had actually waited to go in to report her daughter missing. Some articles say that she went in that same day, the next day, and others say that that she waited an entire week before reporting her missing. But that's been the really big issue with trying to report cases like this, just because they're so contradictory in all of the reports when it comes to trying to keep an accurate record of the events of what had happened. But interesting enough, there was an interview conducted by the Oxygen True Crime in November of last year, 2021, and the interview was actually conducted with Tiffany's sister, Deandra Reid. Now, according to Deandra, that her mother had actually reported Tiffany missing the very next day, but she did say that the police didn't seem too concerned. Deandra said, and that they had actually told her mom to wait to file a missing persons report, and that it didn't seem too urgent to them at the time. Now, one of the things that was reported as well was that Tiffany had a history of running away, and that it was normal, according to her mother at the time. So, but I mean, still, you're looking at a minor that's gone missing. Again, we've covered it a lot, especially with the Henny Scott case, about when exactly something like an Amber Alert would be put out. And unfortunately, in this case, as well as Henny Scott's case, she wasn't presumed to be in any sort of danger at the time. So an Amber Alert probably wouldn't be issued that day as well. Now, according to the Charlie Project, the day that Tiffany disappeared, she was actually wearing a black backpack along with a purse with her nickname Casey on it. That's really important to note because a few weeks after Tiffany had disappeared, a makeup bag that said was hers was actually found along with some articles of clothing at the base of the Carrizo Mountains. Now, according to reports, that was actually a very well-known spot for partying. Now, according to that same Oxygen article, along with that handbag were clothes and a library card that actually confirmed to be Tiffany's, and they actually were found on a dirt road in a local town. And unfortunately, that's where the case stands today. We are left with way more questions than we are answers at this point. Over the years, Tiffany's case has been largely overlooked. There hasn't been a lot of media attention on Tiffany's case outside of occasional updates, but I mean, even still, we haven't gotten too many updates on where her case stands today. A lot of people believe that she may have remained local or traveled into the Arizona or Mexico area, but it's actually believed that Tiffany had left on her own accord. Also, according to the Charlie Network, Tiffany had black hair and brown eyes. She stood about 5'3" and 115 pounds at the time that she disappeared. Now, she usually wears her hair up in a ponytail or in braids. Her nickname outside of Tiffany was Casey, and so I would imagine that she would have kind of gone by that. Now, Tiffany actually has a scar under her right eye and a scar from a cigarette burn on her arm as well. Over the years, they've actually released age progression photos. The first photo that I'm showing here would have been Tiffany in 2004 when she had actually disappeared. At that time, she would have been 16. Now, the second picture up here is an age progression that was actually done by the National Center for Missing Children of what Tiffany would have looked like at the age of 22 in 2009. And the final photo that's been put out there is the final age progression. It shows what Tiffany would have actually looked like at the age of 29 in 2017. But that's all that we've got for Tiffany's case. Now, one thing that I did find, according to the Justice for Native People, was there was a possible link to a Jane Doe that had actually been discovered in La Paz County in Arizona on February 5th of 2006, but later on was identified to not be the remains of Tiffany. So that's been something that's also been tied to Tiffany's case, but luckily that hasn't been confirmed to be true. So as we close off this case, if you have any information regarding the disappearance or whereabouts of Tiffany Reid, I strongly encourage you to contact the Navajo Department of Public Safety at 501-368-1350, or make a call to the Shiprock Police Department at 505-368-1350. And I kind of realized that those are the same numbers, but if you or anybody you know might have any information or knows the whereabouts of Tiffany, I encourage you guys to check out those numbers and to call them and hopefully bring home Tiffany as well and bring some answers to Tiffany's family. I know that we lost Tiffany's mother sometime in the last few years, and my condolences go out to the Reid family at this time. Before we close out the show, I have actually been blessed with an opportunity to talk to a family member connected to the last case, which would have been Tiffany Reid. And I got to sit down and talk to Tiffany's sister, Deandra Reid. And I'd actually like to play that for you now as we close out the show and close out the episode. Let's jump into this interview as Deandra fills us in on so many details about Tiffany and kind of gives us a first-hand knowledge of what had happened during that time. So without further ado, let's jump into the interview. All right, well, I'm sitting down here talking to Deandra Reid, who is Tiffany's sister, and I'm really honored to have you here on the show to talk about your sister. One of the questions that I know that isn't really talked about too much when it comes to these cases is who they are, and what they were like before, because, there's not too much that's ever put out there when it comes to cases like this. So I was going to ask, what was Tiffany like growing up?
Well, as a kid, she was really quiet, really reserved, and she went missing when she was 16. So at that age, she was just coming into her own, kind of figuring out who she was and what her interests were, and just typical things that a teenager goes through. And she was just at that part where she was finding herself.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, right before she went missing, she was really into poetry. She did a lot of writing. Um, she read a lot of poetry. She was able to travel with her school for a poetry slam contest.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so she was really getting into it, and she really liked to sing. For a really reserved, quiet person, she had a really sweet voice when she was singing.
It sounds to me like she had, she definitely had plans. It sounds like, for her future.
Yes, she did.
Now, one of the questions that I wanted to know was, where did the name? It says that Casey was a nickname. Is that where did that come from?
I'm not really sure. I think that that came about with her group of friends. We didn't call her that at home when she was, ever since she was a baby. She used to like a TV show. I can't really remember. My mom would be the one to remember that, but the character on that show was called Solo or something like that, and somehow we came up with the name Sulu. So that's what we would call her at home, a Sulu.
Oh, so it sounds like it was kind of a friend nickname kind of thing, which we all had.
Yes. Mm.
Oh, so I wanted to know, like, I know that, like, I asked you about that police file, and you were saying that the police lost it.
I guess, we didn't even know that her police report was gone. So my mom had filed a police report the next, I think it was like about 2 days after she didn't come home. My mom went to the police department and they told her to come back in a week.
Wow.
And she was like, why do I have to wait a week? She's a minor. But I'm not really sure how the rules are on the Navajo
Mm-hmm.
Nation. But she had to wait a week and she went back a week later to file the police report when my sister wasn't back. And so we thought, everything was in order to kind of get on the track of locating her
Mm-hmm.
until recently. I think maybe about 3 years ago, maybe four. There was a girl that was picked up, and so we have border towns where, my sister went missing from.
Mm-hmm.
Shiprock is on the reservation, and Farmington is about 30 minutes east of Shiprock.
Right.
And I have a cousin who, works in the police department, and she was on duty one night and she heard my little sister's name over the scanner saying that she got picked up and she was being taken to the county jail. And she, everybody knows that my sister is missing, so she got really curious
Right.
as to, could this really be her? Is somebody, using her identification? And that was the case. Somebody had used her identification when they got arrested. And they didn't interrogate that girl. They didn't ask her why she was using my sister's name or anything like that, because according to them, my sister wasn't even in the system as missing.
Wow. Hold on. Wow.
So
Wow, that's
it
a lot. I mean, yeah, sorry.
it was about, I think about like 13 or 14 years in, and we were just barely finding this out. And it was really upsetting. It was really hurtful. It was just a whole bunch of mixed emotions in one, like how or why,
Right, right.
And it was really hard to have to tell my mom that, because this whole time we thought that she was in the NCIC database as missing,
Mm-hmm.
but she wasn't. So she called the police department in Shiprock again and asked them why, which so many years down the road, it's like there's probably not even the same people in there anymore.
Yeah.
So they told her, oh yeah, just come back and refile another police report. And it's like 14 years down the road and she can't remember all the details that she did 14 years prior to that.
Right. That's a lot of time to pass. That's the problem with reporting these cases so spaced out like that, is because you do lose those details, those specific details, the tiny things that are overlooked.
Exactly. And not only that, my mom was battling cancer. So, the chemotherapy, it diminished her memory. There was a lot of things that she couldn't remember from back then till now, or until then.
Yeah.
And she was just really heartbroken about it. And it's messed up because there's nothing we can do about that. We rely on our law enforcement to do the things that we can't. And they completely failed us.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be just a broken record at this point, because you get so many cases of law enforcement being this way, of just, it sounds like they were very dismissive.
Yeah, especially on the reservation where we don't have the same things that, other counties or cities and stuff like that have. So it's like we're lacking in the technology department, and even with just having enough officers to, serve the community.
Right, I see a lot of that every day, with the reservation that I live in, or adjacent to. I've been off the reservation for 10 years now, so. But yeah, no, I see that a lot. I see that in the police force, when we have a real problem when it comes to being understaffed as tribal police officers and stuff like that. So I feel that. So how? Yeah. So that was like 13 years in that they had found somebody with Tiffany's ID, or
No, she was just she didn't have identification, so she was just giving her name.
oh, okay, all right. So she's just kind of using that name.
Yes.
God, that's so frustrating.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
Now, how long after she had gone missing did you said what, couple of days after that?
For what?
Before your mom went to the police, was because it's funny because a lot of these articles that I've read and stuff like that says a week, some say the next day. So I guess just some clarification for for my listeners to really get an accurate picture of really when your mom filed a police report.
I think she went there. I'm not really sure because I wasn't living there with them at the time. But I know it was soon, and I'm thinking it was within a couple of days, and then they told her she had to wait a week. And so when they published the article in the local newspaper, they said it was a week, which made it sound really bad. And that wasn't the case. My mom so she didn't come home from school that day, but that was kind of normal because she didn't really come straight home, she lived with, or she went to school within walking distance to where they were living.
Oh, okay.
So along the way, she would, I guess, stop at a friend's house, hang out for a bit. But she would call. She would call my mom to be like, "Hey, mom, I'm at so and so's house," or whatever. And she never got a call or anything. And then she called me that evening, like about 7, and she was asking. I mean, back then we didn't have cell phones.
I was gonna say that this was way before we had texting and stuff like
Yes.
that. So
So she called me at home because I was living in Farmington. And she was asking, "Did your sister call you today? I haven't heard from her yet." And I said, "No." I told her, "But I'm pretty sure, she'll be back before, the night ends or whatever," because they were at that time, they were having like games and stuff at the schools. So I was telling her maybe she's just at a game, or I don't know, hanging out with her friends, and she forgot to call. And she was like, "Yeah, maybe." And I told her, "I'll call you back tomorrow, in the morning, because I kind of figured she would be back before the next day." And before I got a chance to call my mom, she called me and she was like, "She's not back yet." And she kind of sounded a little panicked. And I think it was maybe like, a mother's intuition that something wasn't right,
right.
because she wouldn't, I mean, normally, she wouldn't, I guess, jump to conclusion right away and think the worst. I mean, because just, I don't know, it's just because things didn't seem to be like that when we were growing up, you know what I mean? We weren't as cautious as we are now today. There's just so much going on today that you don't even want to let your kid go outside by themselves.
Right. It was a different time. I mean, we're talking almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't mean to say that like there weren't, the problems that we had, today weren't existent then, but I mean, it was a little bit more lax. One thing that I've noticed about living on the reservation or within the community like that is that people tend to look out for each other in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the fact that your mom had an intuition that something was, wrong, I mean, says a lot.
Yeah. And I think she really tried to dismiss that feeling, to not think the worst or think bad about it. But
Right.
I know she did. I heard it in her voice. And I even went to, stay down at her house a couple of days to kind of drive around and look for my sister because my mom, she was working. And so I went down to kind of help out to see if I could locate her myself, you know, and I didn't. And there was a lot of, and the thing too was I didn't really know who her friends were.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of hard for me because I wasn't living at home with mom at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really know who my sister's friends were. I did when she was younger, but when I left the house and she went into high school, it's a whole different crowd, and it's a whole, bunch of new people that you meet when you go to a bigger school.
Yeah, you tend to,
Especially,
your friends group really evolves right as soon as you hit high school. So yeah, I get that.
yeah, so it was a little bit tough for me to kind of, and the friends that I did know that she had, when they transitioned into high school, they weren't, in the same cliques anymore. So they were like, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a little frustrating because I didn't really know who her group of friends were at that time.
One of the things that I've read a lot, and it's something that these articles touch on a lot, was did Tiffany have a history of running away and coming back, or where does that come from?
Um, I think it just kind of blew into a whole thing that she was a runaway because my mom did tell the police, or the reporter that she talked to, that my sister did take off a couple of times. It's not like she did it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when she meant, she took off, it's like she took off down the street, and because she had, I guess, a guy that she was dating at the time that lived down the street, and my mom kind of didn't approve of that, so you know she just left to go down there, and it was just down the street.
Mm-hmm.
So I think my mom's her wording got taken out of context when she said she takes off, and so it blew up into this whole thing about her being a runaway and taking off all the time. My sister wasn't like that. She, like I said, she was really quiet. So, she didn't just run off when she felt like it. She was responsible. Um, like I said, she would call home when she would be at a friend's house, and that was a thing that my mom had always asked of us as we were growing up. Like, if you're going to be going somewhere else, please just call me. Even if I'm not home, leave a message, so I know where you're at and I don't have to worry.
Right.
So that was, that was the thing that we did, was we would always call home. I mean, even I did even though I wasn't living there, I'd be visiting with my mom and I'd come home back to Farmington and I would call her, "Hey mom, I made it home." And even if she wasn't there, I would leave her a message on the answering machine.
Right. Just it's a it's a habit to
Yeah.
never not want to break.
Yes. And so yeah, I guess her word just got taken out of context and they just made my sister out to be like this, delinquent child. But I mean, it doesn't matter if she was delinquent or not. She's still not 18. She's still a minor. She still lives with my mom.
Mm-hmm.
That should not have anything to do with it, even if she was a delinquent. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. A lot of these cases, when it comes to the news, they tend to focus in on really negative things, and it tends to be something that they profile. And I was really curious about that too, because I read that as that she had history of running away and stuff like that. Which, again, like you said, I mean, kids take off.
Mm-hmm.
I'm no stranger to that. I have a 7-year-old. When he was 5, he took off down the road, and I didn't see him for like 3 hours, and I started panicking. I had called the cops and everything. So, it's one of those things. But I mean, it does, like you said, it doesn't matter because they're still minors that way.
Yeah.
So after a while, after you guys had reported her missing, I mean, what happened after that? Was there search parties? Did anybody go out and look for her? Did the police?
I think a lot of it after my mom reported her missing, it was mostly like family and family friends that really did most of the searching at the time.
Mm-hmm.
My mom reached out to um, a group. I don't think that they exist anymore, but it was, I can't even remember what it was called. It was Angel something, and they were, I think they were a nonprofit
Okay.
um, in Farmington, and that agency or the organization, they gather people to help, do searches and stuff. And so they were the ones who pretty much organized the whole search when they found her stuff um, alongside the road in I can't remember what that place was at.
Okay, so that takes me into what I was going to say is because a lot of the things that I found when it comes to, what they found, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, a few articles say that they found it at the base of the Carrizo Mountains.
Mm-hmm.
And then, then the interview that was done by Oxygen said that it was some road in a local town. So, I mean, I guess I would like kind of clarification because it kind of confused me too.
And see, that's the thing about talking to media is if they're not sure about something, I think they should reach out and, you know, just to make sure before they decide they want to put something out somewhere.
Right.
It was at the base of the Carrizo Mountain. There was a town there, and it slipped my mind. It's a little town. It slipped my mind. I can't think of it right now, but if I can, I'll message it to
Okay.
you. But yes. Um, so I think the FBI had finally got involved. My mom, I think she was reaching out to them to kind of get something going, like we can't just sit here. We have to look for her. We have to do something. We have to ask people.
Mm-hmm.
And so she started going beyond the Navajo Nation Police Department because they weren't doing anything. They're like, oh, she'll be back. She's a runaway. Just give her another few days, just kind of brushing it off like it wasn't a big deal. And so my mom reached out to the FBI and they were like, yes, okay, there's a minor missing. We need to do something. We'll gather the search. And I'm not really sure what led them to even search out that way. Oh no, it's because there was a passerby. There was somebody driving down that road right there and they seen a bag on the side of the road and they picked it up. And my sister, I think it was her library card or something was in there
Mm-hmm.
and it had her name on it. And, the person that picked it up was like, oh, this is the girl that they've been talking about that went missing.
Mm-hmm.
So she called the Navajo Nation police and told them, hey, I found this girl's bag and there's like stuff scattered all across the road. I don't know if you want to come out here and pick it up. And so I think they did send somebody out there to pick up her bag,
Mm-hmm.
but the search was done like I think maybe a couple days later after that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So then the FBI came out, they went out there and they searched along the highway where they had found the bag. And from what they had discovered, to them it seemed like somebody had been throwing stuff out of the window as they were driving along the road. As they were digging, like they were digging in the bag and they were like, oh, just throwing it out the window as they were going.
Yeah.
So it was over, I'm not sure how long of a stretch. I think they said it was a mile. I could be wrong, but there was a stretch to it, to where they were finding her things as they were being tossed out of the vehicle.
Yeah, like you said, like they were rummaging through the bag and just throwing things out as they were going through it.
Mm-hmm. And then Somebody told us, I think it was a local from that area, that there was a known party, like a party spot up that mountain right there,
Mm-hmm.
but we didn't know. I mean, we're not familiar with that area, so we didn't really know where the party spot was, or you know, when people live on the res, they're like, "Oh, you go up this road and you turn this way," you know what I mean? And
Yeah, absolutely.
and so I don't think they ever found that spot, or I don't even think they looked. I
Mm-hmm.
I think they did go so far up that road, but they didn't find any of her stuff up alongside the up the road or anything like that. So they just kind of they called it and didn't, I guess, search any further.
Wow. After that, I mean, that kind of seems to be where all the news coverage and all the stories kind of drop off about Tiffany's case. I mean, was there anything outside of, like you said, family searches and stuff like that here and there? Was there anything media wise or that law enforcement was actively doing? I mean, this is almost over 20 years. So, I mean, has there been any sort of update or anything that you can share?
The only update I can share right now is that my sister was finally entered into the NCIC database like 3 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Um, Actually, I think it was 2 years ago, right before COVID.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
It was after our mom had passed, because, I was so excited that she finally was in the system, and I was a little sad because I couldn't share it with my mom.
That's really frustrating that it took that long for her to be put into that system. I
I
mean,
know.
it's not unheard of, but I mean, it's definitely something that you hear a lot about these cases. So,
Yeah. And my biggest thing was like, when I found out that she wasn't in the database, I was I had a lot of questions. I was like, why? Why didn't they do it? What if they
right,
picked her up
right.
somewhere and she gave a name and it didn't even like red flag her or anything, like she's missing? And in her mind, could she be thinking like my family's not even looking for me? They don't care, type of thing?
Mm-hmm.
And being um being native, there's a lot of like superstition and just things that people say. And one of the things I always think about is, my sister's not here with us. Like, we don't know where she is, but
Mm-hmm.
in my heart, I feel like she's still out there somewhere. I don't have any dreams about her. I had maybe like one dream, and she was telling me to help her, come get her. And she was being held somewhere against, her will.
Hmm.
And that was like the only dream I've ever had about her. And she still looked like she did when she, went missing. Whereas to my mom, she's passed. She's not here anymore. And I dream about her all the time. Like, she comes to me in my dreams and, tells me things like she's proud of me. And but I don't have any dreams like that about my sister. So I feel like, she could still be alive.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just, I'm holding on to that hope, because she's not, I mean, we don't know. We don't know where she is. People, I'm pretty sure there's people that talk amongst themselves, their groups, their whoever they hang out with, but I haven't heard anything that leads me to believe that she's not here anymore.
That's a good way to keep going and to hold on to that positivity, because so often a lot of people just kind of let that go, and they kind of just let themselves fall into that. So that's a really good way to look and to keep her memory alive, and that she is still here with us. So
Yeah, until we actually find her, good or bad, and then I think that's when I'll accept it.
do you have anything, if your sister's listening or if she's out there and somehow hears this, do you have any message you'd like to get across to her?
Um, Gosh, there are so many things I want to say to her, but you know, I just want her to know that we never did stop looking for her, even though the legal system failed us in getting her into the NCIC database. If she was picked up and let go, that was on them and not us. You know, we love her and we miss her so much.
Well, thank you again, Deandra. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you sitting down and telling your sister's story because, like you talked about how there are traditions and there are sayings, within our community. And I think that the one that has inspired me is that the longer we talk about these cases, the more we talk about them, I've said it a bunch of times and I'm pretty sure my listeners are tired of hearing it. But, my mom used to say, once you stop talking about somebody, they're gone. And the moment that you continue talking about them and you start talking about them, they tend to find their way back, back to you. Mm-hmm. They usually show up sometime later. So, but I hope that we can get some answers, and we'll definitely keep touching base. If anything, new develops, I'd love to have you back on and we can talk about that.
Okay. Another thing I just, wanted to tell you was this whole thing that of my sister missing. It really it gave me an inspiration to get into the legal, to go back to school for criminal justice myself. So yeah. So I did get my associate's degree, but I'm pursuing my bachelor's right now in criminal justice. And I'm doing a lot of, well, not a lot, but I'm doing my internship for advocating for domestic violence victims.
Wow.
So I do a lot of webinars with like the MMIW and the trafficking and male trafficking and teen violence and just all kinds of stuff, to kind of just spread awareness. And I love it. It really, it really does give me hope, even though it's been so long. I know that, there are families out there that do find their missing loved one from like back in the 60s, the 70s. And, it's not always good, but at least they have that closure. And so that's what I'm looking forward to, is some closure for my sister and for myself.
Well, I'm so glad. I'm so glad that you're continuing down this path, not only for yourself and for your sister and your family, but like you said, for other families and stuff, and those that need it and that guidance. So, on behalf of them, I want to say thank you for doing that for them and continuing to spread the awareness like you are. We'll have to have you on the show to kind of advocate a little bit more. And it's been a while since I've had anybody that's part of the organization kind of come on. So it's always nice to talk about different aspects of the stuff that Indigenous people go through. Like you said, like domestic violence, like trafficking and stuff like that. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well, thank you again, Deandra. And
yeah,
like I said, we'll have to have you back on sometime. And hopefully next time we're going to be talking about awareness and stuff like that.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Thank you so much, Deandra. You have a good one.
You too.
Thank you once again to Deandra Reid for that great interview and giving us a lot more information and a whole lot more perspective on what it was like during that time. And like I said at the end of that interview, Deandra, we look forward to talking to you more as with any updates, as well as bringing you on the show to talk about the things that you are doing for Indigenous families that are going through similar situations, as well as many more. So with that being said, that brings us to the end of the show. I want to say thank you again to our great sponsor, Twisted Bear Boutique, for giving us this brand new studio, for continuing to allow us to bring these episodes to you on a weekly basis. We're actually going to be trying to release episodes every Tuesday because, of course, it's True Indigenous Crime Tuesdays. But do not forget also to check out my paranormal podcast that I have out there called Scary Stories to Tell from the Res, and that is released every Saturday, which I like to call Scary Res Story Saturday. And thank you all once again so much for all your love, all your support. Those that have checked out our YouTube channel as well as our audio podcasts on Podbean, Google Play, Spotify. I can't thank you guys enough. And if you'd like to get a hold of us, you can check us out on Facebook at One Missing, One Murdered, All Indigenous Podcast, or searching us up on Facebook at 1M1M. And if you have an idea for a show or a case that you want us to talk about or you want us to cover, hit us up on our Facebook. You can hit me personally up on my Facebook at Jordan Lone Bear. Or if you'd like to send us your story or have any questions, I'd love for you guys to hit us up at our direct email at trueindigenouscrimepod@gmail.com. So with that being said, guys, let's wrap up the episode. And like I said, don't forget to tune into the Paranormal Podcast on Saturdays. And with that being said, I'd like to say a blessing for every one of you guys, for the families involved, and my listeners as well. May you all be safe. May the Creator watch over you all, as well as dedicating these shows to the stolen lives of Indigenous people. I'm your host, Jordan Lone Bear, and we'll see you on the next episode. All recording and editing is done by me, Jordan Lone Bear. Music is brought to you by Ridley. You've been listening to a Lone Bear audio production.